Well, hi everyone. I am really excited that we're back together again this week to talk about some new and upcoming professional development that I'd like to share with you. And this time together, we're going to be talking about assessment. But I always like to recap, where have we been as a group? We've done a lot of amazing work this year as teams and individuals, and I just want to talk about where we've come from so far. First thing we did is we created our PLC groups, which was amazing. You have come together in groups and you have worked really hard, and I'm really, really impressed with the work that you've done so far. We've talked about our group's mission, vision, and goal statements. We've dove deep into establishing a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all of our students. We have identified our essential standards for each course, and we've developed our learning targets for our instruction. We talked last time about our developing fair and equitable grading practices, which I think is really important. I've already seen some really amazing work that's being done in classrooms throughout this building. So I applaud you for taking the leap and really taking a look at some of the grading practices we're using and seeing if they're fair and equitable. And then finally, like I said, this week we're going to start talking about assessment. What does assessment mean and what does that look like in our school? So before I get into that, I kind of want to talk about the instructional cycle. Why am I starting with this? Well, because we are in the business of teaching and learning. And so I think it's really great to have a visual such as this to talk to us about, what we're already doing, but just to make sure that we're going through the instructional cycle together as individuals and collectively. So it's looking the same for a lot of our students. So the instructional cycle is always going to begin with pre-assessments. Pre-assessments is we're just trying to figure out what do our students already know when they're coming in the door. Sometimes we think they have a certain base level of knowledge, and it turns out they don't. Other times we think that they're going to need a lot of learning in a particular area, and these pre-assessments show us that they already have a lot of knowledge. From that point, we're going to figure out where our instruction begins, and sometimes it means adjusting what we thought we were going to do for the day or for that lesson based on the information that came from that pre-assessment. We're going to do our instruction. It's going to be differentiated for different students in our classroom, different learning styles, and then we're going to dive right into doing some assessments. Now, assessments are really just figuring out what do our students know, how are they doing, and what sort of changes do we need to make. So, from the individual results of that assessment, we're going to determine is this assessment either formative or summative. Formative means we're gauging understanding, we're taking that information and we're adjusting, we're maybe doing some reteaching, relearning as students, and then we're going back and doing the assessment again to see what they know. If we feel like based on those individual results that our students they've got it, they understand it, they can showcase that learning based on those essential standards, then that becomes a summative assessment and we move on to the next thing. So like I said, I really think this visual is critical. I have it up in my office just to remind myself that's constantly what we're doing. This is a cycle. We're not starting over again. It's just cyclical. So, what are some pre assessments like I talked about? This is giving us valuable information about what our students already know. What are they coming in the door with? Additionally, it provides us information about maybe what they still need to learn. Like I said, sometimes we think kids have a base knowledge about a certain subject or topic, and it turns out they really don't. And then that means, oh, we need to make some adjustments and figure out where we need to start. These pre-assessments helped us figure out where the instructional cycle begins. If you go back to my previous slide when I talked about the instructional cycle, we have our plans, we're ready to go, and the kids walk in the door. But then, based on that pre-assessment, sometimes we need to make adjustments, and we're going to start on step 6 in our instructional cycle instead of step 2, where we thought we were going to, based on the information we just gathered. We're going to maybe modify our learning targets. We think this is the plan for the day, and so therefore this is our learning target. And then that pre-assessment, actually we need to change gears. We need to do this instead. So we're going to need to modify that learning target along the way as well. Here's some examples of pre-assessments. We could do tabletop discussions. So we ask the students to turn and talk with the kids around them about a particular topic that is going to be introduced. Tell each other what you already know about X. It might be a short writing prompt. Take the first 3 minutes, go ahead in that shared Google Doc in the classroom and tell me everything that you already know about photosynthesis. We could try open-ended questionings. We could begin the class with some questions, some basic questions about the topic that we're going to cover and see what sort of answers and responses that we get. We could do a ticket in the door, send some email responses. So as the kids walk in, there's a question listed up on the board. Talk to me about the Battle of Bull Run. Tell me everything you know about that. And then email me responses within the next 3 minutes. And then I'm able to quick scan through those responses and determine what our students already know. From there, we're going to do the instructional cycle, like I said, and then we're going to get into what's called formative assessments. This is obviously occurring during the instruction, and it is to provide ongoing feedback to both the teacher and the student. Remember that feedback is really, really critical for both the teacher and the student. This allows for adjustments to help students meet those learning targets. So if I give a formative assessment either during or at the end of a class, and I realize based on that information, we still have some learning to do, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to do some reteaching. So hopefully our students are able to meet that learning target. Remember, our students always need feedback. A score, a number, a letter, that is not enough. They need to know what they're doing well, an area that they could improve upon, and a strategy to do that. It can be both formal or informal. I can walk around and as students are having a discussion, I can interject and say, hey, that's a really good point there, but I think you need to focus on this. Or it can be formal. A student can turn in an assignment, a writing prompt, and I can give verbal or written feedback based on what I've read in their writing. Always remember, though, we are checking for understanding and then adjusting accordingly. Do our students understand? Are they able to meet those learning targets? And if not, what do I need to do differently to make sure that instruction happens to hopefully get them to that point that I want them to get to? So, what are some types of formative assessments? We could do a ticket out the door. At the end of a class, I say take the last 3 minutes and I want you to write down two things that you feel really strongly about, that you're really confident in what you know, and one thing that you're still a little bit unclear on that you have some wonderings in. That's a ticket out the door. We could do a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or an in the middle. So if I quickly explain that to my students, I'm just going to check for understanding. On the count of 3, I want you to hold your thumb up. If you're doing great, you understand everything. Thumbs down if no, I don't get this at all. Or maybe in the middle of like, I'm feeling okay, but not super strong. And I ask them to do it all at the same time. So then that way I can quick scan the room and say hands down. And I get a really good gauge of what's actually happening and checking for their understanding. I could do a fingers up, 1 through 5 to gauge understanding. That could be number 1 means I'm really struggling, I don't understand it, and number 5 means I got this, I'm great, totally fine. So say on a count of 3, hold up your fingers and let me know how confident you are in what we just learned. Maybe we're going to do a red card or a green card. Each student gets a card at the beginning of class, and on one side there's a green circle, and on one side there's a red circle. I'm going to do an understanding check, and I'm going to say, okay, everybody, pull out those cards. What I want you to do right now is I want you to flip it over to red or green on your desk to let me know how you're feeling. Red means, nope, not good. I need some more help. And green means, I'm fine. I'm going to keep working. I'm good to go. We could do a Google form. I send out a Google form at the end of the class and I ask a couple questions. Students send that information in and it's sorted automatically in a spreadsheet for the teacher so they're able to see what the students know and what they still need to learn. We could do Twitter polls. Like I said, our kids love technology. There's a lot of wonderful apps and programs out there where I can create a Twitter poll or I can create a text in your answer where I say, tell me the top 3 things that you learned in class today. Tweet it out. And then I'm able to gather those responses after class, look through them, and make some adjustments for tomorrow's class period. We could do a self-assessment or a paired assessment. So I'm going to ask the students, I want you to assess yourself based on this learning target rubric. Proficiency scale is what we use. I'm going to say, I want you to take that assignment that you just did and I want you to self-assess. Maybe I want you to do it with a pair. I want you to swap papers and I want you to assess each other and then go over why you gave each other the scores that you gave based on what you've read. Then we might move into after the instructional cycle and our formative assessments are really strong and we feel like our students are confident in their learning, we might move on to a summative assessment. These assessments provide a snapshot of proficiency relating to the essential standards of the course. Remember, we're always going back to those essential standards and those learning targets. What should students be able to know and do by the end of this course? And so a summative assessment is really going to allow them the opportunity to show their proficiency related to those standards. What do they know? What can they do? It helps us also compare the learning of students in the classroom. What adjustments need to be made? Maybe I give a summative assessment out in my class and I'm feeling pretty confident based on the formative assessments we've done so far. My students feel prepared. When I get those summative assessments back, I realize, wow, 60% of my students did not meet proficiency in those standards. And you know what? That's okay, because based on our fair and equitable grading practices, we're going to allow those students to redo those summative assessments. I'm going to take that feedback from what I'm seeing the students that don't understand yet. I'm going to do some reteaching, and we're going to do a different summative assessment to see if we can gauge the understanding based on those standards. And then, how, like I said, it's how well did our students use the formative assessment feedback to further develop their learning. Maybe they took everything from the formative assessment and they were able to use it to develop their learning, and then those summative assignments showcase their learning in relation to those standards. Um, and then I think one of the things I think is really important is that I want to show you as a staff some really important critical research based on assessments. I can stand up here all day and I can say this is what's right, this is what I believe in, but I need to back that up with information to show that this really is best practice. This really is some good research, and I want to be able to help us as we understand and continue to develop our processes around assessments. So what are we going to do? Our PLC groups, we've already worked on our essential standards. We've created our learning targets, but we're going to work together on our assessments as well. What does the research tell you? I'm not going to go through it in detail in this presentation, but I'm going to provide you with some resources of what we're going to use going forward. So our PLC groups are going to be meeting with our instructional coaches. We're going to be meeting during our pullout time, during our PLC time, and on a couple of our staff development days. And you're going to be working with those instructional coaches, and you're going to be going through, you're going to have some time to really to dive deep into this research and to learn more about what does research say about assessments. One of the most, probably one of the most well-known individuals, we've already talked about him so far this year, is Rick Wormelli. He talks a lot about formative and summative assessments, grading practices, things like that. There's a video on here that I'd like you to watch. If you don't have an opportunity to do it, you'll be able to do it with your PLCs during your time with the instructional coaches. But this is just a really great video that gives us some basic information about assessments. Here's an article that I have that talks about hybrid teaching. Right now we're back in person 5 days a week, but we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic. There's schools around us that have already been forced to go to remote learning. So I'm not saying that we're going to, but just still thinking about assessment in terms of hybrid teaching in case we need to go forth that way for the remainder of this year at certain points during this year. So there's an article here about that. And then we're going to do, like I said, some group work with our instructional coaches, and we're going to follow this model, talking through different types of assessments and how to implement the strategies in our classroom. So for those of you that like to know what's going on and like to think ahead, I wanted to provide you with the resources that we're going to be going through. But those of you, don't worry about it. We're going to do it together in our time together, with our PLCs and our instructional coaches. But we're gonna work through some of the information that research shares with us about assessments. So just to wrap it up, I always like to talk about where have we come from, but where are we going? We've done our PLC groups. We've created those mission, vision, and goals, which are amazing. We've worked on a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which we're continuing to develop and refine. We've talked about fair and equitable grading practices. We're making this big switch to standards-based grading, which I'm super excited about. And then that goes hand in hand with our assessments. What are we doing in the classrooms to help understand what students know, understand what they still need to learn, and then adjusting our practices based on the information that we're able to gather through those assessments. And then, next time we're together in the future, we're going to start talking about some interventions. So when things just aren't working based on what we're doing, what are some interventions that we can implement in the classrooms, and within our areas to just further meet the needs of our students in our building. So I appreciate all of your time. It's really great to be together to talk about where we are as a staff and where we're going. I'm so proud to be working with all of you, and I'm really excited about the work that's been done so far, and I can't wait to see what's next. All right, everybody, take care and have a great day.